double click on some of the things you spoke about. You mentioned about the stock prices rallying. I was looking at the data. I think over the last 1 month after these negotiations, Pharma gained almost $440 billion in market cap, which was a big relief for the industry as a whole. But what, from your vantage point, what pressures do you think Pharma will face on revenue, of course, margins, as this whole thing plays out over the long term? And what should they do you spoke about negotiating early, but is there anything else they can do in terms of how they launch their products across the world, right? How they manage operations? Any other suggestions for our Pharma colleagues?
Yeah. There's the short-term analysis, which I think that you've said there was a sigh of relief that the president was willing to negotiate and that he wasn't going to stick to essentially very strict price controls if people would come to the table. I think that's what we've seen, the short-term market reaction to that. But I don't think that's the long-term play. And I think that the industry has been very slow to come to the conclusion that I'm going to suggest, which is that the long-term strategy of profitability through price increases and the ability to just bring new drugs to market at whatever the market price will bear, I think that that is not a long-term strategy that is sustainable.
Sure.
I think that the industry has been dealing with 3 categories: pricing, reimbursement, and access, all as separate silos. And I think that no longer makes sense. If you think about affordability and you think about drugs being able to help populations, you need to actually integrate pricing, reimbursement, and access. And so that's going to mean not thinking about drugs in the unit pricing, but thinking about drugs more across the impact that they have on populations, the impact that they have on the total cost of care, a new way of thinking about what is the value of an outcome-driven pharmaceutical industry. And that's going to mean that therapeutic differentiation among drugs is going to become more important.
Absolutely.
And knowing the real-world evidence and knowing the impact in terms of value, which is outcomes and cost, is really the way that I think pharmaceutical pricing should be thought about in the future.
Sure. And David, you've been talking about this for a while, been a strong advocate of value-based pricing. Have you seen any good examples in the industry around doing this?
Yeah, I have. But, first let me just comment to people that are listening. I usually think I'm generally right about things. I think I have a pretty good perspective.
Sure.
I'm just terrible at timing. So this value-based care, I'm absolutely convinced this is where we need to go. But as you can see, this can take decades when you talk about a complex, fragmented healthcare system.
Correct.
So, ultimately, do I believe we're going to move there? Absolutely. Do I know the timing of this? I don't. But I think that this is where leadership in the industry comes in. And I think there's an opportunity, just like I believe the CEOs of Pfizer and AstraZeneca saw the opportunity. They wanted to be in there first.
Yeah.
I think there's an opportunity for pharmaceutical leaders to start thinking about pricing their products differently. Now, are there some good examples? Absolutely there are. There are a number, obviously, internationally in the National Health Service in England, but there are also some examples here in the U.S. And I'll give you one example that I was involved in. When I was secretary of the department, the new antivirals that treated hepatitis C were released. I thought that was an amazing new development. One of the reasons is I was always scared as a physician of needle sticks and getting hepatitis C myself, which had no cure. But now there are antiviral drugs that were coming on the market that had 95% plus cure rates.
Correct.
So I asked in the Department of Veteran Affairs, how many veterans had hepatitis C? And the answer was 173,000 veterans had hepatitis C.
Wow, that's a large number.
So I made the statement that I was going to cure all veterans in the United States of hepatitis C. I asked Congress to help me do that. I needed $1.5 billion to buy the drug. They gave me $1.5 billion to do this. At the time, the pricing of the drug was about $70,000 a course. Prices have come down with competition now, but at the time.
Launch time. Yeah.
At the launch time, right. And we went out and we contacted 173,000 veterans. We brought them into our medical centers and we treated them. And today there will be less than 10,000 veterans who have hepatitis C who are cared for in the Department of Veteran Affairs.
So
now think about that. We spent a lot of money on drug, $1.5 billion. But these people that we cured are not going to have end-stage liver disease. They're not going to be in our hospitals for that type of care.
Yeah.
They're going to be able to live extended, longer lives than if they had hepatitis C virus.
Sure.
And so that medication by itself may have been expensive, but when you look at the total cost of care, the impact on mortality and morbidity, that to me is value-based care. And so you can begin to start pricing that at the value that it offered and pricing it on a population of veterans in the case that we had responsibility for. And that's a different way of looking at the drug rather than trying to go out and sell each unit one dose at a time.
Absolutely. No, that's a great example. And I remember this company, of course, you're talking about is a client of ours. And if I remember the economics correctly, it was almost the drugs, while it was expensive, was still 1/4 of the total cost of hospitalization. If that would occur.
You know, one liver transplant can be, $500,000.
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah. So it was significant value from that perspective. Now, and that brings me to the next question on this piece. If you see what's going on, just taking this example of $70,000 versus, let's say, $500,000, right, from a cost perspective. When we see the overall cost, healthcare costs in the US, pharmaceutical industry, which obviously gets a lot of coverage and press, right, because of many reasons, would like to hear that from you. It's still a small percentage, right? The healthcare delivery, there are so many costs, and pharma is a smaller portion. One, why does this happen? Second, is there an attempt through the PBM Reform Act, Trump RX, to also give pharma a way to mitigate any profitability hits or whatever it is they're going to have by these price differences? Or am I reading this wrong?
Well, I think that it's a mixed picture. While pharmaceuticals are a, small percent of the overall healthcare costs, they have been increasing at a more rapid rate than the rest of healthcare.
That's true.
And so that's a concern. When you talk to most people in health plans and you talk to many healthcare executives, they are seeing their pharmaceutical expense rising at a much faster rate, and that's causing significant alarm. We've seen the absolute obsession with GLP-1 costs because of the growth and the use. Now, I happen to believe that the pharmaceutical industry has not done a good job on the PR front, on articulating its case, and even on the GLP-1s, although I understand that people are completely freaked out about these medications. To me as a physician, if you had said to me, or as a healthcare leader, and I led the largest healthcare organization in the United States, we have a magic bullet that can decrease obesity, decrease metabolic syndrome, decrease cardiac events, decrease stroke, and at the rates that these drugs can.
And indications are just still evolving. It's still early.
And it's still evolving, right? We haven't even talked about behavioral issues or addiction. But if we had that type of solution that could lower healthcare costs, wouldn't everybody want it?
Absolutely.
And yet we bring it on the market, and because it's rising in the pharmaceutical silo, people are saying we have a huge problem.
Absolutely.
So to me, this is symptomatic of the problem that we have in healthcare, and that is we're so siloed and so fragmented that we're thinking about health plan costs, we're thinking about provider costs, physician costs, we're thinking about pharmaceutical costs, device costs, instead of thinking about the total cost of care. And this is where I think the pharmaceutical industry, if they actually show the ability to start pricing their drugs based upon the value that they bring, that's going to help drive a different way that the industry is viewed so that you can maintain profitability. Now, if all you're doing is launching, similar drugs to one another, then of course you're going to compete solely on price. But if you're really offering new therapeutic differentiated products, there has to be a mechanism to reward that type of innovation, research and development costs, and that is going to be pricing it in a different way rather than unit pricing.